Okay, Rob. So I'll be honest with you. Despite being in France, my experience of the top 14 this weekend was largely a watching a little bit of the Castres game when I got to my hotel. B having to desperately needing the loo and therefore stopping off in a pub that we've seen on many occasions but had never been in. I don't think the Connemara in Bordeaux. So nipped
Not those,
in
no.
nipped in there. Saw a little bit of Toulouse Lyon, which was incredibly one-sided and pretty dull. And then also, which I know we're going to go on to in a bit of detail in just a moment, but seeing the score at half time, Stade Francais leading at Clermont, thinking, yeah, my prediction that backs to the wall, Stade Francais are going to pull it out of the bag is looking good here before probably the implosion of the season. As I was sat waiting for a train at Saint-Emilion with 80 Chinese tourists. So yeah, I'm going to need you to kind of take us through this. But yeah, what did you get? What did you get to see?
Getting quite good at the old implosion, aren't they, Stade Francais?
Well, getting better, it would
Getting
seem.
better, yeah. As I said, I tweeted, which I was hoping maybe I was in cricket mode and the kind of crossover between English cricket fans and French rugby fans isn't quite what I assumed, but yeah, better at collapsing than the English cricket team of the 90s. So I'm talking of cricket, I watched this while we were playing, well, not while we were playing cricket. I watched the first half and then I was about to go out to bat. I was incorrectly given run out, but I'd kind of missed the start of the second half as I've kind of been batting, watching the end of our innings, getting dressed, getting my tea, and turned on at 70 minutes, 65 minutes or something. And I was like, oh, wow, it's 34-20, having been 17-6 at half time to Stade Francais. And the last 15 minutes are an absolute rout. It is like white flags everywhere from Stade Francais. It was pathetic. Um, I have now since watched the intervening 25 minutes. It was pretty close up at, well, no, not really. I think it was 20 all at about 55 minutes. And the fact that they then ran out, what was it,
55, 20, was it
55
something like
20. Yeah, it was 17-6 at halftime, which is, I think, the kind of key part of this. It was, the first half was not a thing of great beauty, which in hindsight was probably quite predictable between these two sides. But Stade Francais looked like the Stade Francais of last year. They had Ward and Marchand in the centres. They looked really organised. They were kind of matching Clermont physically. The defence looked really good. Clermont didn't look like they had any invention in attack. And the Marchand try came from a kind of mistake, kind of classic, kind of Saracen, like early Saracens kind of, or when Saracens got good, that kind of like kick and will pounce on a mistake sort of thing. And it all looked pretty good, like 17-6 up at half time, looking organised, Clermont looking lacking ideas, etc. And it was cliche. I don't know what Uriel said to them at half time, but whatever he said, it worked.
that?
Um, but it was just kind of, and it wasn't loads of. They were just way better than Stafford would say in the second half. They were just Claremont looked so much better at every aspect, and it was forward carrying and pretty simple stuff at times. But Stade Francais just looked crap. Like yeah, okay, Clermont are a physical side, but when you've got guys just one out runners or relentless carrying, and it just looked like they were making ground, and they did play well, but yeah, they were just running riot by the end. It was completely one sided that second half, and some real warning signs for Stade Francais, given how they folded in that second half. That said, the best player on the pitch, and a player that I've been quite sceptical about this season after some brilliant hype last year, Baptiste Jeannot was phenomenal. Like, I think there's one try of the seven or whatever, or eight that Clermont scored that he wasn't the key person,
Yeah.
key instrumental person in. Um, and he was part of the build up for that anyway. But which I guess he's a 9, but he sparked most of the tries almost single handedly, particularly. I mean, the one at the end that kind of made the top 5 from Foysac was a chip, and it was a loose ball at the end. Kind of summed up where Stade Francais were at the end. It's literally like turnover, really easy, chips over the top. There's no one there. He picks it up, and it's just a stroll in. It could have passed it to about 3 different people. But he was at his best, which is really nice to see from a young player that promised a lot. Kind of has been overtaken by Bezzy again. Don't know whether he had a few injuries or whatever, but Bezzy seemed to be the man. Jeannot played full 80. He was the best player on the pitch. Brilliant. Great to see. Shout out also to Peter Gus Suakula, who carried a lot in the first half and didn't really get anywhere, which summed up the Stade Francais defence. But second half, him and Jeannot were just working really, really well together. Load of carrying, really active, pretty much involved in every play. Scored his first try in top 14, which, given that we saw the end of Fritz Lee, or they said their goodbyes to Fritz Lee, is quite a good sign for Clermont. Trying to think, Benjamin
They've got PO coming in,
and they've got PO coming in. The one try with Delgy, there was a brilliant bit of play from Delgy and Newsom for the Newsom try. Delgy's pace was like absolutely burns Lester Etienne. Benjamin Elder came the highest scorer in top 14 history. And we'll come on to a little bit of a mini quiz on that, Richard. But he did look some of the early shots of him from his career at Oyonnax. He looks old, but also nothing like Benjamin Erdepageta. Like, it's kind of really weird. He looked old as a youngster, but not quite the full distressed maitre d' of an Argentine steak restaurant that he looks now. But yeah, well done, Clermont. Clermont hold the key to the next rounds, I guess. Stade Francais are not out the woods. Actually, I'll touch on that now, given it makes sense. So, in terms of next week, Clermont, well, relegation-wise, Stade Francais have the edge on the head-to-head over USAP, but Van have the edge on the head-to-head over Stade, and USAP have the edge of the head on the head-to-head against Van. So if they are all tied on points, I don't know what happens. I think it comes down to best overall points differential and then best try differential, and Stade are ahead on those. So I don't think Stade can. If there's a 3-way tie, Stade will not be in the relegation zone. So some sort of positivity. They're also playing at home next week. Clermont are currently not in the top 6, but they are 3 points behind La Rochelle, 4 points behind Castres, and 5 points behind Bayonne. They are ahead. They win the head-to-head over all 3 of those teams.
Is that on what points difference?
It's match point, like league points, as it were.
Okay.
From the head-to-heads. Then it's, so obviously quite a lot of them are like one team wins at home without a bonus point, the other team wins at home without a bonus point. It is then points differential, like aggregate score between those games. Then it goes to try differential, I think, in those games, and then you go on to kind of overall league points. But Clermont are ahead of the Castres, Bayonne, and La Rochelle on the head-to-head. They're way ahead of Castres on the head-to-head. They absolutely dicked them
away,
Michelin, which is interesting. So that kind of bodes well for Clermont, who do go away to Montpellier, but Montpellier also did quite well this weekend, and they, we'll come on to that in a bit. But Clermont generally relatively positive, I think. Anything on Clermont, Clermont,
nope.
Stade? Castres, you mentioned you saw them. They were the better team by miles. Bayonne were rubbish, despite sending a really strong side. Castres dusted them physically up front. Last game for Julien Demora more than
Yeah,
likely at the Stade Pierre Fabre. We'll come on to that in a minute. But he basically did everything other than score a try. He like got so close to scoring a try on his final home game a number of times and just didn't quite like kind of knocked it on or like didn't quite fall for him and stuff like that. But he did play very, very well. Which was good to see kind of a man on his last appearance in front of that crowd kind of because he was
a
nominated for the year that
legend.
Ben Botica won. He was
Yeah,
nominated for Player of the Year, wasn't he? And key part of the 2018 winning Castres side. I think he scored a try in the final when they beat Montpellier. Um, but Castres looking pretty good. They are still in fifth, which would mean an away game if there is no movement. But they are 1 point behind Bayonne, so there is a chance. Bayonne, which I don't know what was going on. They just look so disjointed. They just look completely off the pace. They didn't look like them at all. Um, Elsewhere, looking down the bottom, the key game, as we called out, Van versus Poe. My boys, 50 up. I think it was the biggest away score or biggest away margin of victory for Poe since like 2004 or something.
wow.
Um, but a last minute or clock in the red try for Tom Suverby meant that they also got the bonus point, which was actually quite soft. It was quite clearly like a fresh young player coming on against quite a tired defence. Van did score 4 tries of their own, which is quite good. But key players here, Gaetan looked absolutely amazing. Could have scored a hat trick. There was a slight knock on in the build up to one of his tries. He looked amazing. Browbury looked pretty tidy. Maddox looked good. Back first start in a while, I think. Atasog Bay, obviously a legend. Joe Simmons kicked all conversions, which is why the scoreline looks so stretched out because it's only like a 3 try difference, but it looks quite big 52-26. Poe looking good. Like, did all right up front against Van as well. So, yeah, it was quite competitive for most of that game, or like half time, it was 12-17, but Poe eventually
Yeah,
kind of ran away with it.
slightly beleaguered cast Van missing a few key men.
Yeah, no Francis Saili, which we've said they're a different team without him, but they also missed Gorison and Ryarsi. Ruru was back on the bench. I don't know whether any of those guys are going to be back for the final game away at Bordeaux,
Mm,
but you don't hold out much hope, especially if they don't have Saili. I
no,
think he's the real key. Gorison as well makes so many tackles. And then the other beleaguered side, Perpignan lost 38-15 away at La Rochelle, which was actually pretty close for quite a lot of this game. It was 17-15 at one point. Perpignan's scrum kept them in the game, which is quite impressive to say against La Rochelle, but looked like they kind of ran out of steam. And by the end, La Rochelle were kind of had plenty in the tank. Like their last try is like proper La Rochelle, like Dante through the middle and like looking absolutely rapid, like which you don't say that often. Dylan Lays looked good. 2 tries for Tuarca Barlow on his final game at the Marcel de Flandre for La Rochelle before he moves to Stade Francais. He looked really good. But yeah, La Rochelle looked pretty good, other than the odd struggle up front in the scrum. All of Perpignan's points came from the boot of Tommy Allen. So again, not creating too many
yeah.
opportunities. They did score a try, but it was rightly chalked off because Bantonda just decided to hold on to Botti at a scrum and a magic gap appeared.
There were a lot of you mentioned Care Barley there. There were a lot of kind of send-offs, weren't there, this weekend? You mentioned Demora as well. I think Legarec in the game. Yeah, there was quite a few presentation ceremonies and what have you taking place,
Have you
understandably,
seen
given the.
the Have you seen the Dumora one in the changing room?
No, I haven't.
They
No.
basically got like a proper musician, like an actual musician with like an accordion and a microphone, and they're like singing songs. But Dumoura's just like they're all in a circle, and Dumoura's just in the middle of this circle. They all seem to be singing along, so I didn't know what this. I didn't recognize the song, but it looked really cool. Have you seen the Tawara Kerbalo one?
I have, yeah, with West and Antonio and Skelton, was it doing sort of
Yeah,
hacker?
doing a hacker for
Yeah.
him, and he was welling up as well. That looked quite cool. Um, should say Racing lost at home in their last home game to Montpellier, which actually a pretty bad result for them. That means they have nothing to play for this weekend. Montpellier can't make the top six, but they can make the Champions Cup. But that brings us on, Richard, to my mini quiz.
You've kind of spoken a little bit about the state of play in the top four teams. Are any others you want to before the final reckoning this weekend?
No, I feel like Toulouse are a bit of an also-ran team this weekend. It feels they feel very background all of a sudden, which is weird to say. I don't know. I feel like I've kind of forgotten about Toulouse. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah, they're
Leon, like, who are
giving up.
they? They've get like
They
Puyo out for
flickered.
the
They burned
season.
brightly at one point, but
They're almost certain to finish 11th, I think, which is, yeah, well done them. They've
we
got
didn't.
nothing
The
to
only
play
team,
for.
the only game we haven't mentioned was a very hungover Bordeaux going to Toulon and losing as expected. I watched a little bit of this, and the only thing of note that kind of happened that did make me laugh was Robbie Knock on commentary. Mathieu Bastereau was in the stand,
Yeah.
and he said, "There he is, like the team manager, family man, Mathieu Bastereau." So I remember he said words to the effect of, "I remember when he was at Stade Francais." When he wasn't a family man, enjoying life in the French capital. Which, if
Wow.
ever there was a loaded statement, yeah, maybe. I mean, I know we're hoping to get Robbie on at some point, but they just cracked me up. It was such a good line.